The news claims that a UN-brokered ceasefire was taking hold in Yemen, yet sporadic clashes are taking place. Just what is the ceasefire that has been brokered? Nevertheless, the announcement has raised hopes that peace talks due next week may finally resolve the country's devastating conflict led by Saudi Arabia. But this war has had many casualties, over 9,000 dead so far to begin with, a surge in arms sales from Western countries to Saudi Arabia, which has used illegal weapons like the cluster munitions, and the rise of the Al-Qaeda.
As the UN's brokered ceasefire agreement came into effect at midnight on Sunday, shortly after the truce, Saudi Arabia carried out airstrikes in different parts of the country, mainly in Taiz and Nehm.
All Yemenis wish an end to the bloodshed. Once our enemy extends its hand for peace, we should show our commitment. But I believe that Saudi Arabia does not want to have peace in Yemen. The ceasefire came into effect, but we witnessed historic airstrikes on Taiz and later airstrikes on Nehm district as well as Maidi.
With Saudi warplanes stopping their airstrikes on many parts, Yemenis are optimistic that such cessation of hostilities would bring an end to over 1 year of Saudi death and destruction.
We are unsure whether the Saudi airstrikes would stop in commitment to the UN ceasefire agreement. People are anticipating an end to this war that has caused death and destruction everywhere in the country. Yet time would tell if talks are likely to end the Saudi war or not.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Ismail Wilda Sheikh Ahmed, has welcomed the UN-brokered ceasefire deal, saying it is an important step to restore peace in the Arab nation. Sheikh Ahmed said the truce is critical and urgent because Yemen cannot afford to lose more lives. Saudi Arabia attacked the country over a year ago. Nearly 4,900 Yemenis, many of them women and children, have been killed since the beginning of the aggression. These mountains of Nuqum, Barash and Uttan, which are surrounding the capital Sana'a, have witnessed hundreds of Saudi airstrikes. Such air raids claimed the lives of hundreds of Yemeni civilians. With the beginning of the ceasefire agreement, people hope peace and stability would return to the once known as Arabia Thalix. Mohammed Attab, Press TV, Sana'a.
I guess joining us for this edition of the debate, publisher and editor of Politics First, Marcus Papadopoulos, joins us from London. We have former member of the Yemen National Dialogue Conference, Hamza Al-Kamali, who joins us from Egypt's capital, Cairo. I'd like to welcome both of you. Hamza Al-Kamali, I'd like to start with you. Obviously, you're aware of the news, a UN-brokered ceasefire taking hold in Yemen. If you can please tell us what kind of ceasefire is this, because there's still violations that are taking place. We still hear about this Saudi aerial campaign being waged against Yemen.
First of all, if you are talking about violation of the ceasefire, you have to talk about all sides, especially the Houthis, who are, unfortunately, they didn't take the ceasefire on effect on Taiz. They had take maybe they had 6 violations in Taiz, in Ad-Daha area, and also in Western Taiz and other places. But to be honest, all Yemenis now are pushing forward for the peaceful resolution. They want to take place in Kuwait City. The most important thing is that those negotiations, those peace talks, will depend on the implementation of 2216. War crimes committed by Houthis and by all sides must be stopped, and people must return to their position just before the 21st of September, when Houthis invaded Sana'a city and took over the government and took over everything. Everything must go back to this, to the date before that date, and things must be solved in a peaceful way. Everybody wants to implement the national dialogue outcome. They want to go to the elections. They want to end this war and to things to come better for them. People are looking forward to go back to schools. Children want to live in a peaceful environment, and they want to go back to their schools, and people need to go back to their work. Everybody wants this war to end, but I think this time we count and we depend that Houthis and Saleh militia will do the right thing and will never violate the ceasefire anymore, and will push forward for the peaceful resolution that will take place in Al-Kuwait City.
Very well. So Marcus Papadopoulos, our guest there, Hamza Al-Kamali, says that it'd be great if things go back to square one, back to a year ago. Just a couple of weeks ago, the war marked 1 year. So my question here is that the way to deal with bringing things back to what they were, is to wage a war that has killed over 9,000 people, that has destroyed a large portion of Yemen's infrastructure? Is that the way to move forward to bring back some kind of resolve over whatever the problem was in the first place?
Well, what the other guests just said, I find quite bewildering. I'm quite perplexed about that, because once a conflict begins in a country, and a dreadful conflict as the one is in Yemen, the country can never go back to how it was. So no, we can't go back to square one. I sincerely hope the ceasefire lasts, and I think that anyone who is committed to peace, committed to human rights, will want it to survive. But here's my concern, and it's two words put together: Saudi Arabia. The conflict in Yemen is an unknown conflict to many people in the West. Why? Because Saudi Arabia is a very close friend and ally to America, to Britain, and to France. And the American and British and French governments, they know very, very well the appalling behavior of Saudi Arabia in Yemen. So Western politicians and Western journalists are not going to refer much to the conflict in Yemen, because it will expose what Saudi Arabia has been doing there. But let's just remember, Saudi Arabia has turned a conflict into a horrendous conflict. It has, in effect, invaded an independent sovereign country. It has committed terrible war crimes. According to the United Nations General Secretary, it has been using cluster bombs on civilians, and that, of course, amounts to a war crime. So Saudi Arabia really is the West's bully boy on the Arabian Peninsula. The West, in particular the Americans, have given Saudi Arabia a blank check to do as it pleases on the Arabian Peninsula in order to preserve American influence in that part of the Middle East. Let's not forget, in 2011, there were peaceful protests in Bahrain. What happened? Saudi Arabia sent troops across the border and brutally put down those protests. So if we return to Yemen today, yes, it's welcome there's a ceasefire. Yes, I sincerely hope it will last and that there won't be an eruption. We won't go back to how the conflict was. But my concern is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia still has its forces in Yemen. And how can the conflict be truly brought to an end when Saudi Arabia has spilt so much blood in Yemen and has its forces there? In effect, Saudi Arabia is an occupying force in Yemen, which is an independent sovereign country.
Hamza Al-Kamali, our guest there, posed the question. Can you answer him?
First of all, I have to, I cannot agree with all what he says. I agree only in one thing, that Yemen needs peace right now. Talking about Saudi Arabia as it's a one country, it's not talking about a coalition of 10 countries is something wrong. I think it's a coalition of 10 countries. It consists of Gulf countries, Egypt, Turkish, Pakistan. All of these countries are a part of the coalition that's held to support the legitimate government in Yemen, neglecting or not reminding the war crimes that has been committed by Houthis and Saleh militia is something unacceptable. Houthis and Saleh militia until now are still blocking Taiz city, which has been the place where Houthis had committed many crimes against children, against women, against even old people, sniping, clustering, shelling the city and the civilian people. More than 2,000 casualties, according to some field report, that has been killed by Houthis and Saleh militia. Neglecting these things and talking only about Saudi Arabia is taking half of the truth, not all the truth. If we need to solve the Yemeni issue, we have to talk about everything. We have to talk about every single crime has been committed against the people of Yemen. But at the same time, we have to be very strong to all parties that they have to stop the war and to go to a peaceful negotiations to take the Yemen out of this catastrophe. And I have to say that the date of the Yemen catastrophe hasn't only begun at the 26th of March, at the beginning of the Arab coalition. It has begun at the 21st of September 2014 when Houthis invaded capital Sana'a and surrounded the president and the prime minister and all the ministers of the government, and they controlled all over the government offices. So my point of view that Yemen at this time must not be taken like this. Yemen must be taken as a whole. All crimes must be stopped. The war, the ceasefire must last as much as possible to enable the people to go to a peaceful resolution. Implementation of 2216, the United Nations Security Council resolution, is the solution of Yemen to get out of this catastrophe.
Okay. Marcus Papadopoulos, go ahead.
Well, I mean, that sounded like a press release from Riyadh. You know, I've been listening to Saudi officials over the last few days in particular, and they've been talking about how Saudi Arabia simply wants to see freedom in Yemen. They want the people of Yemen to have democracy. What are we listening to? Saudi Arabia is a dictatorship and one of the most barbaric in the world. Let's just take some examples of Saudi Arabia. No churches are allowed on Saudi territory. If you take a Bible into Saudi Arabia, you get into serious trouble. Women are deprived of some of the most basic human rights possible. If a woman is alleged to have had an affair, they execute her. Saudi Arabia carries out beheadings in public. They crucify people in public. What are we talking about when we try to sort of justify what Saudi Arabia is saying, what Saudi Arabia is doing in the region? Saudi Arabia is a repugnant country run by a repugnant monarchy, and Saudi Arabia's tentacles don't just extend into Yemen, they extend into Syria. And I heard a Saudi official saying they also just want to see freedom in Syria. Well, Syria is a far more progressive country, a far more free country than Saudi Arabia could ever be. And you know, Saudi Arabia has caused so much bloodshed in Syria, so much bloodshed in Yemen, that it really is intolerable for people to come on this program and to act almost as if they're justifying Saudi Arabia, giving out a press release on behalf of Riyadh. It is Saudi Arabia that is up to its neck in blood in Yemen.
First of all,
Hamza Kamali, go ahead.
I have to reply for that. I have to reply for that.
Go ahead.
I have to reply for that. I am a Yemeni. I know my country more than any other people. I'm not defending Saudi Arabia, but you are not telling the truth about Yemen. Houthis and Saleh militia are the main cause of our problem. You are neglecting this. You have a problem with Saudi Arabia. I don't have to do that. I don't have to deal with that. But I'm telling you, really, you are misleading the audience when you talk that Houthis and Saleh militia are not the cause of the catastrophe. They are not. You are neglecting their crimes. In Ta'is city, you are neglecting their crimes. In Aden, you are neglecting their crimes in Sana'a when March. I'm not defending Saudi Arabia. And listen to me,
Saudi Arabia acted illegally by sending its soldiers into Yemen, yes or no?
I'm not talking in behalf of anyone. I cannot justify somebody telling that Bashar al-Assad who made war crimes. Nobody can imagine that someone like Bashar al-Assad, you are defending someone like Bashar al-Assad who killed 100,000 of his people.
Oh, this another press release from Riyadh
I'm talking about Yemen.
Another press release, of course.
Please respect yourself. Please respect yourself. Please.
Well, excuse me, President Assad is a secular leader.
I am a Yemeni people. I am a Yemeni person.
He's a Muslim. He goes to churches as well, and he goes to monasteries. You won't find a Saudi government official going to a church. You won't find a Saudi government official. My problem in Saudi Arabia.
My problem is. And
who told you that President Assad has caused 100,000 deaths?
radical group
Ankara?
named Al-Houthis, backed by Iran.
Go ahead, Hamza Al-Kamali, go ahead. Marcus Papadopoulos, let Hamza Al-Kamali talk. Hold on a second. Hamza Al-Kamali, go ahead.
This is not acceptable at all. This is your problem. You need to talk. You have a problem with Saudi Arabia. I don't have to do something with Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about Yemen. I am talking about that a radical religious group named the Houthis has attacked my capital, Sana'a. And this group is backed by Iran. This group has arrested the president, the prime minister. This group is arresting hundreds of journalists. This group has done all this war for Yemen, and you are telling me about Saudi Arabia. Yani you are saying that Saudi Arabia has committed war crimes, but you are neglecting and you are not talking about that the Houthis and Saleh, Iran-backed militia, has committed a war crime. This is not a human rights. This is a politics.
Okay.
This has nothing to do with human rights. And by the way, Houthis has prevented all mosques from all the imams from leading the mosque in Sana'a. Every area controlled by Houthi, there is no woman that can lead at any place. In spite of that, the National Dialogue outcome in Yemen has set a 30% of all government places for women, but Houthis has cancelled everything. This is not a human right that you're not talking about.
Ver, before you pose that question, let's take a quick time out, listen to some viewer comments,
Yes.
and then we'll get back to the debate with Marcus Papadopoulos. Listen to those comments.
Nothing is achieved by Saudi Arabia. What they achieved is that they have killed thousands of their Muslim brothers and sisters and also increased the American warmongering mobilization of money through purchasing of their weapons. Nothing much has been achieved by the Saudis apart from exporting Wahhabi ideology. Only American Western countries have earned billions of dollars and sold all of their arsenal and modern armaments. Saudi Arabia had only blood on its hands. Saudi Arabia hasn't achieved anything. Less than 24 hours after they signed a ceasefire, they violated, hoping to catch the Houthis off guard. Saudi will lose even more soldiers. When will they ever learn? They got a green light from Washington and Tel Aviv to carry out the onslaught against the defenseless people of Yemen.
Just some of the viewer comments there. Marcus Papadopoulos, I believe you had some comments. Go ahead.
Well, I'd just like to pose two questions to the other guest, and I'd like him to answer them. Number one, has Saudi Arabia, by sending its forces into Yemen, broken international law and the UN Charter? And the second question is Saudi Arabia a free country? Could you answer those two questions so that the viewers can actually understand something about Saudi Arabia? No cackling, no waffling, no ifs or buts. Can you just answer those two questions?
Hamza Al-Kamali, go ahead.
I didn't understand the second question.
Ask him again, Marcus Papadopoulos.
Does Saudi Arabia have freedom? Is it a free country?
Hamza Al-Kamali.
This is not my issue. This is not my issue to talk about. I'm here to talk about Yemen. This is the first thing. The second thing, you are saying
Saudi Arabia
Saudi intervention in Yemen is.
It has caused a bloodshed.
Come on. Give me my chance to talk.
Marcus Papadopoulos, let Hamza Al-Kamali talk.
You asked me.
Marcus Papadopoulos, hold on. Hamza Al-Kamali, go ahead.
To answer your question.
Please.
Oh my God.
Hamza Al-Kamali, go ahead. Go ahead, Hamza Al-Kamali.
Excuse me, please. Give me my chance. You don't. Okay. You have asked about the Saudi intervention in Yemen, whether it's based on the international law or not. First of all, there is a legitimate president, Abdurrabba Mansour Hadi. This president has sent an official message to the Arab League, to the United Nations Security Council, and to the Gulf GCC. There are many many security agreements between my country and between the Gulf countries. It stated that if anything has invaded Yemen or attacked Yemen, Gulf country must support the country. The second thing that I want to talk about is that the intervention is official because the legitimate president has called the Gulf countries and the Arab League to support him to defend the legitimate government of Yemen. This is something official. This is the president who has been elected by 6.5 million Yemenis. The other thing that you don't want to talk about is that 80% of the ground is controlled by the legitimate government, and maybe 90% of the Yemeni people is supporting the Arab coalition that defend them against Houthi and Saleh crimes.
For that?
Talking about Saudi Arabia and trying listen to me.
Evidence. Evidence. Don't just give out these numbers,
Saudi Arabia and trying excuse me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Excuse me. I am a Yemeni person. And trying to make it appear as Saudi has invaded Yemen is something not true. Saudi would never attack Yemen if all the Yemeni people is against that. Saudi is supporting Yemen by helping Yemen legitimate government to restore its places, to restore the capital, and for forcing
I'm unfortunately going to have to come in and give Marcus Papadopoulos the last go at it here. I'm sorry. Marcus Papadopoulos,
let me finish.
Go ahead, in closing.
Well, the other guest, he failed to answer the questions, and you know, he was dishing out all these different percentages. He has not named the source, so we really should disregard them as a court of law would. The reality is that there is a terrible conflict in Yemen. The people suffering, as always in war, are ordinary people. But you know, where you find trouble in this day and age, the hand of Saudi Arabia is at play. Every Islamist terrorist attack in the world, there is a signpost pointing to Saudi Arabia. In Syria, an independent sovereign country, Saudi Arabia has undermined the Syrian government by supporting terrorists, and Saudi Arabia has the audacity to say they just want democracy in Syria, when of course women in Saudi Arabia are not even allowed to drive. So, you know, going back to Yemen, let's hope the ceasefire lasts, but let's always remember that Saudi Arabia is a malignant country in the Middle East, and it's because of that, and because of the support they have from the West.
Thank you for that. Publisher and editor of Politics First, Marcus Papadopoulos there from London, and former a member of the Yemen National Dialogue Conference, Hamza Al-Kamali, spoke to us from Cairo. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of The Debate from Mikhail Tawayi and the entire team in the capital, Tehran. Goodbye.